Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. Today I want to tell you the story of Frau Anne Spiegel, who was the Federal Minister for Family, Senior Citizens, Women and the Youth, and how the major flood that we had in Western Germany last year that I reported on my channel forced her finally to step down from office. But before she accepted to step down from this position where she got a lot of other people's taxpayer money for doing fairly nothing, she was lying, she was manipulating, she was hiding behind her husband and her children, and she tried to manipulate and deceive the public about her misdeeds, but more about that later. Now today's talk is not really about Anne Spiegel, but I'm talking about this because she is once again one of these cases that is an archetype of a certain class of people in Germany. It is fairly typical for politicians and the managerial class of her generation. She is in her early 40s, so that would be something like young Gen Xers or older millennials, depending on where you want to draw the line really. So I want to introduce who she is basically real briefly, then I want to tell you where she was in July of 2021 when the flood, when the natural disaster happened in Germany, and her role in it as a minister in the state of Rhineland-Palatinate in Western Germany, and then also the things that unfolded later on this year where she was already federal minister, and when the events and the circumstances and the actions of the responsible or irresponsible politicians were properly investigated over half a year later. And then towards the end, and I hope this won't become a very long video, but it is necessary I think to say these things, in the end I want to take a little step back and talk about the broader implications of her case and how it really shines a light on these lies that the leftoids and the progressives of her generation especially are promoting and obviously believing in the end themselves. They are drinking their own Kool-Aid basically. Alright, but before that, I want to give a big shout out to all my supporters and my subscribers. Thank you all so very much. If you find this useful, pass it on to your friends and family. Also check me out on other social media platforms, and if you want to, you can support my work via Patreon or Subscribestar. The links are in the descriptions down below. Alright, so just that we get the timeline right, the disaster, the flood, happened on the 14th of July in 2021. At that time, as I said, Anne Spiegel was the Minister, Family, Women, Youth, Integration and also Consumer Protection, and she also took over the Ministry for Climate Protection, Environment, Energy and Mobility, so a lot of topics. And just before that, she was one of the frontrunners, or maybe the frontrunners of her party, the Green Party actually, I think I haven't mentioned that yet, in the state elections that were in May 2021. And if you remember correctly, we were already in the beginning or during the campaign for the federal election in 2021 that were in September. So there were a lot of things she had going on, a lot of balls in the air. And just at this really inconvenient moment, a natural disaster happens. And as the Minister for Climate Protection and the Environment, of course, you have a role to play then, maybe more than other ministries. So I actually reported on this disaster last year. I told you that there was some looting that was reported. That was pretty early when it happened. And then later I told you about the aftermath of this flood and how it caused maybe Armin Laschet from the CDU the election in autumn, because he was seen laughing while there was a press conference on these very grave matters. A lot of people, I think 180 people died overall in Western Germany, and a lot of people were injured and lost their homes. By the way, the Ahr Valley, especially where disaster struck the hardest, I think, is still not rebuilt 1 year or almost 1 year later. People are still trying to fix their houses, they haven't received enough aid, etc. So while Germany is trying to fix all the problems all around the world, they cannot even help Germans in Western Germany, for example, here, when a natural disaster destroys their houses. The politicians just, of course, in the first couple of weeks, they all wanted to have these really nice photo ops, and Frau Spiegel also did that. Very, very nice photos they were taking where she is acting as if she's telling people what to do when they were just really posing for a picture in reality, of course, you know how it is. But a couple of weeks later, these people there who lost their houses were forgotten by the politicians. But that was not the thing, of course, that got her into trouble. Well, there was another case from Western Germany during that time. It was also the Secretary for the Environment, Ulrike Heinen-Esser. This is no joke. She's called Esser, which means eater in English, haha. And she celebrated a birthday or something on the island of Mallorca, and that just a couple of days after the disaster, and that cost her job. She had to step down because of political pressure. But because Frau Heinen-Esser looks the way she looks, and she's from the CDU, and she stepped down, there was not that much news about it, but Anne Spiegel, she made larger headlines. Now, why was that? Well, there were multiple reasons. Some of them came out first, and some of them came out only in March this year, actually. So one point of criticism was that a couple of days, like 10 days after this incident, she and her entire family went on a 4-week vacation in France. And in such times of crisis, it is just absolutely impossible for a minister to just vanish on a vacation. In times of crisis like these, you have to be in your district at your desk doing your work. So she claimed that she was in constant contact with all the important stakeholders, and that she via the internet or via telephone takes part in the important meetings, but it turned out later that none of this were true. She was lying the entire time, and parts of her ministry were actually covering for her. They also claimed that her own party, the Green Party, didn't even know that she was on vacation. They thought she were here, or that she is at least joining these meetings, but that was not the case. So I think this is also a lie. In my personal opinion, I think this is just a lie in order to mitigate some damage and take the blame away from the party. The party knew probably, but they don't want to admit it so that they can blame her, and I think they made an arrangement. But this is just my personal theory. So let's sum that up once again. This first criticism: she went on a long vacation with her family. She did not stay in contact. She did not really take part in these work meetings, and she lied about it the entire time directly. Now, a second point is that in March this year, when the investigations took place, also a short message, or many short messages of her, came to light, these SMS messages, right? So first, there was one message from the day of the disaster, from the afternoon of July 14th, and you must know that days ahead there were already severe warnings of flooding from European and German institutions. The warnings were there, and they were on their desks. Now, she was not at work, and her team in the ministry, they were trying to put together a press release that should warn people in her state. And the passage was also about people who run these campgrounds that are near these rivers. And by the time that this message was written, they already had a lot of emergencies in the state. The firefighters were all over the place. Disaster was striking already. The flooding was already there. And in that press release, it said explicitly that this is not an extreme flood, so don't worry. And she didn't read it, and she explicitly said in her text message back, when they showed her their proposal for the press release, she said, "I could just briefly glance over it. Please use gender-neutral language when you refer to the campground owners." Other than that, it is fine. So that means she didn't read the press release that said, don't worry, there is no severe disaster. Maybe she was packing for France at that time already. And then the other message was on the next morning, on July 15th, and that was from her press team to her, and they said, oh, the blame game could start immediately. We need a proper wording that we warned ahead of time, and that we always made all the data transparent, and we already warned in the cabinet, and without our preventative measures, and everything would have been much worse, etc. So you see that we say in Germany, der Fisch stinkt vom Kopfe her. The fish starts smelling from the head. Her ministry also was thinking the same way as her. They don't care about the people, they don't care about the work, they only want to look good and they want to shift the blame to others, and they even lie about having warned, and they lie about preventative measures. They didn't do anything like that, but they just make it up after the disaster struck. As an example, she just made up that during the night of the disaster she was on the phone trying to help until 2 a.m. However, the investigators couldn't find any proof of these phone calls. She was probably in bed or doing God knows what. She just made up these phone calls. In the same way that she made up that she took part in meetings, she had those meetings during her vacation, right? She had those meetings in her calendar, but she didn't actually attend. So this is how blatantly this woman lied here. And once again, she was living with these lies for almost a year, and it only came out now in March this year. And then something happens that I have never seen before. A federal minister steps in front of the microphones, in front of the cameras, and talks about her own private personal life and paints herself as the victim, and tells us a sob story in which all the other people and all the circumstances are to blame, but not herself. I try to put a link to this video in the description down below. If you understand German, that is very nice. Maybe there is CC, I don't know. So anyway, that was this year, 2022, April 10th. And the media said it was an apology, but if you watch the video, at no point is there an actual real apology. And only one day later, April 11th, she stepped down from office because her own party also didn't buy her BS anymore, I think. So during this press conference, she said that she and her family just needed this 4-week vacation in France because it was all a little bit too much for them. Well, I think the people who lost their houses there or who are struggling every day in Germany, they also would like a 4-week vacation in France that the taxpayer pays for them. So she said that all these different kinds of jobs that she accumulated during this time was really a lot of stress. And then she has 4 children, and her husband who tries or who is supposed to care for these children, his health is so weak, so that didn't work out well. And all these curious health measures that she of course has nothing to do with, and she is not to blame for that either, right? That was very hard on her family too, not on the taxpayer's family, no, just on her family, of course. And at the end she even looked to the side, and I guess she was facing one of her handlers or one of the consultants or PR guys, and she looks at him and back into the camera, and she looks at him and says, well, what would be a good boilerplate for this now? And the German phrase that she used, muss ich das noch irgendwie abbinden? I actually had to look up what that means in that context. This is PR media speak. This is a special term from propaganda and PR, and it means that you sum it up once again and give the key messages. So even when she wants to apologize for something truly despicable, she still thinks in these public relation terms. She still tries to deceive and manipulate the public here. But when she uses these terms on camera, it of course backfires. because a lot of other people also didn't know this expression in that context, etwas abbinden. When we hear that in German, we think about making sauces thicker by putting some flour or some starch in or something. So people just wondered, like, what is she talking about, cooking now? Or I mean, most people don't know this propaganda PR language. But because she studied politics and psychology, she knows this deceptive, manipulative, slimy, underhanded stuff, of course. So these were the facts, or this is the reported story that I got from the mainstream media. What is my opinion now? What do I think about that? So first of all, I think that she herself, Anne Spiegel, she probably started believing all these lies that these leftists were telling the people over the last decades, and that is that you can have a great career, you can be a leader, even a minister, and have a family and free time and all that stuff, and you can juggle all these things. This doesn't work. Now, I think she has 4 children and her husband is the primary caregiver, I think, while she has a career in taking other people's tax money. And now, of course, it's a positive thing that she has a family and 4 children. That is great. God bless her. But maybe she should have done some research of how to deal with a large family when you are at the same time a leader. And you just need to read a classical novel in order to find that out, because in the foreword you learn something about the people from the past and what they did and what nobility and really rich people still do until this day. They have a bunch of servants and nannies. And as a state minister, she makes in a month what other people make in a year. So she easily makes 400k base salary plus other expenses. And you tell me that from that money, she basically must be a multimillionaire by now. She cannot afford a nanny or 5 nannies. And just look at Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission. I think she has 7 children or something. Do you think that she, with her political career, she was a federal minister in Germany also, do you think that she cared personally for all her 7 children? No, of course not. People like that have servants, and that is how they can have a large family and a very, very taxing career, taxing at the same time. And then I think another important thing to highlight about this kind of politician is that they are trying to get not only one job but several jobs at the same time. And in theory, or assuming that you actually do the work and you want to do this well, this wouldn't even work. There is no way that this would work, because if you are a minister and you want to do it right, that is more than enough for a single person. You cannot have 2 ministries or something like that. It just doesn't work. So what does that reveal? It only reveals that she doesn't do the work. She has her underlings and her henchmen who do all the work for her, and then they send her the proposal, for example, that she doesn't read, and she just says, well, please use gender sensitive language. Other than that, it's okay, but I didn't really have time to read it because, oh my God, my girlfriends are here right now. I think you get the idea. That is why they can be the front runner of their party during the campaign. They can be the minister for family. They can be the minister for the environment. And at the same time, there is a campaign already starting on the federal level and all these things. How does that work? It only works when other people do the work and they get the money. They have a staff of people that they delegate everything to, and they just get the money. And this is why it makes sense for them to accumulate these jobs, to take over multiples of these jobs, because they see that, and I think this is very funny, they see that as passive income. They think that public office is something like having a stock depot that gives you dividends every month or something like that. It is passive income for these people, yes. They think that they worked their way up in the party in the past, and this is now paying dividends, right? And every new office they get is just passive income. And other people, like some people they delegate things to, they do the actual work. And even that work is not real work, of course, but you get the idea. So the thing that saddens me, but that doesn't surprise me at all, is that in the public discussion about that in Germany, the wrong things have been in the focus. They focused on the fact that she went on this vacation, and now people are angry because she went on a vacation, which I actually agree with, because I said in a time of crisis like that, you just can't do that. Even an engineer or a worker, during these critical times, they are not allowed by their employer to go on vacation. They have to be there, even when a big delivery comes or something. So here, people lost their lives, people lost their houses, their livelihood, and she just goes on a vacation. That is absolutely wrong, but that shouldn't have been the whole focus. All the deception, all the lies, and the fact that even in the beginning she didn't do the work that on paper she had to do. Even when you look at her statements from before, she only ever cared about this gender-sensitive language and women here and minorities there, but she never did her actual job. And the focus of the discussion, and I know that I'm dreaming right now and I know that I'm delusional, but the focus in a sane country should have been that people like these, and once again, the discussion should not be about her in person, I couldn't care less. We just found one of these cases. There are hundreds and thousands of these people still in office today. They are the problem. The problem is that people, despicable people like these, are holding public office and they are becoming multi-millionaires by accumulating taxpayers' money for doing nothing, and they do even worse than nothing. They are actively trying to harm German people during their time in office. And then they even have the audacity to lie, manipulate, and try to deceive and gaslight the public about who the actual culprit is and what actually happened. All right, but I think her lifelong vacation just continues. Maybe there is no real change for her. She didn't work before. She doesn't work now. She never worked a day in her life, it seems, judging from her Wikipedia page. But I think financially she is still doing very, very well. All right, that is the curious story of Frau Anne Spiegel. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. I really thought I should bring this story to your attention because it really shines a light on a lot of these things that are going on right now in Western societies, especially the lies that are fed to young families and young women especially. Then these young, or by now middle-aged people, I would say, that are pathologically irresponsible, and they don't even get why people are upset. That's the thing. They don't even comprehend why they did something wrong or what they did wrong. In their minds, everything was great, and then these evil people just don't want to allow me to continue milking the system. And then in the end, one day before she was forced to step down, and that is the thing that shocked me the most, she basically blames her 4 children and her sick husband. It was because of them that she needed to do that. They just needed a timeout, and that is why she couldn't do the work. And of course, nobody ever mentioned that people like that normally, and I repeat myself, they normally have servants and nannies and gardeners and cooks and whatnot. So on a more basic level or on a more practical level, that was the thing that really confused me the most, that nobody, no public pundit or something just said, well, don't people like that normally have servants who do that? And nobody, literally no one said that. And for me, that was really the obvious answer to this non-problem, because there are a lot of examples for that in history and also in present times. This is the way to do it. This is the only way you can do this. But I think she just drank the Kool-Aid from her own party. Take care. Servus, Kameraden.